have, well, even if it's an internal communication, which is a funny thing to say.
They thinking,
I mean,
person whose house I live in, bring me food now. And they're not thinking of the words, but that's definitely what they're thinking.
Well,
like, I don't know how.
But I don't think that in that case, I don't think that's like a proposition.
Why?
Right?
What is it then?
That's just like a set of like feelings.
Oh,
what?
set of feelings.
What's wait, what is a belief then with respect to a proposition?
It's just like a belief is just like an attitude toward a proposition that's
right. What's an attitude?
An attitude is another mental state.
Yeah.
But that just
what kind of mental state?
Well, it's kind of like I guess like how do I define attitude?
I would say it's a feeling.
I guess so, but if you add the like propositional, that's where I think that is going to be a problem. Because of course animals have attitudes, but I don't know if they have propositional attitudes.
Well, they have attitudes.
But if you believe, because I asked Haiti if she
and a proposition is just an acknowledgement of or a representation of a state of affairs, right? Yeah.
Well,
no?
I take a proposition to be more so like a statement, like it's
of
our language of that refers to
a state of affairs. Just say it with me.
Refers to a state of affairs. Yeah, sure.
Right, and a statement is I just said it for you earlier.
A statement is a
representation of a state of affairs.
Yeah, in our language, though.
Hey, JJ.
In our language.
Do you think a statement there can be a statement that's not
what's
in our language? What are you talking about?
What's the representation of a state of affairs?
That's like very broad. That's like a statement refers to representation by means of language.
Yeah, and language is?
Language is a vehicle of communication, of human communication.
Of a representation of a state of affairs.
Yeah, but I just said human.
So it's just what?
I just said it's a vehicle of human for human communication, not non-human.
So language is only a vehicle or mechanism of human communication.
Language, yes.
Okay, so what is it that you call non-humans communication? What do you call that?
Well, I'm just going to call it non-human communication. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, then you're just describing a language, but not wanting to call it a language. That's fine.
Hey, so JJ, are bees susceptible to Cartesian scenarios?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, maybe.
I don't understand. Like, if like I've got a dog currently because my brother has a dog, right?
I mean, even among humans. I'm sorry, Eddie. I'm sorry.
Keep going.
Because it's ongoing.
Go ahead.
And I want to put a button on this.
Fine.
John, even among humans, there are degrees of complexity of beliefs, right?
Perhaps based upon the cognitive ability. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. You have degrees of sophistication of beliefs or complexity of beliefs. But you still want to call them all beliefs. Now walk back down your biological tree. Cats certainly have beliefs.
Well, I mean, you heard Brenda talk about the sunflower, right?
I don't think so. What'd she say about a sunflower?
She's saying it knows where the sun's going to come up and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Plants, a lot of plants are interesting examples.
So do you think plants have a mind?
So that's tricky. it's hard to say no, but it's hard to say yes also, because it's hard to imagine what that is for a plant.
Are you saying your pantheism does not incorporate the panpsychism?
It doesn't, because I have a real problem with panpsychism. It's hard to put a pin in what is being said about panpsychism. I'm sympathetic, but I'm not fully behind it.
I personally think it would make more sense, but because at that point, what would you even call the mind of God if not a mind that's incorporated in material and so forth?
I'm sorry, what?
Well, I mean, do you believe that God, as you understand it from a pantheist view, is a mind?
No, might be, but there's no need for me to do that.
If the God doesn't have a mind, why call it God?
For other reasons. The universe is maximally great. Nothing can be greater than the whole. Another term for which is absolute.
So the universe is God because you understand it. Even though it's not a mind, it's maximally great, so it qualifies as God. Is it? 'Cause I'm like,
Yeah, that's part of it. There's nothing greater than the absolute, the whole, which is all, everything.
do you kind of agree that the mind is a brain?
Yeah.
So you're kind of like a physicalist,
Yeah, I'm very much a physicalist.
but a pantheist,
Yeah. God is physical.
and not a panpsychist
Correct.
who believes that bees have knowledge and justified true belief.
Can you present a view instead of just asking questions condescendingly?
No, I'm not. I don't have to be committed to it, but it's fine with me. I can assent to that.
Yeah, special creation.
As I've shown you.
Well, you think I was being condescending?
Yeah, I think you're kind of being.
Well, I mean, I've already told you this. I mean, I don't know why you keep asking the same question. I've already told you the answer, and I've given you reasons why, and you have failed to really critique it.
So that's what it would be. I do believe in biological evolution.
I'd like to hear an actual critique.
Well, sometimes.
I don't think you're capable, though.
No, I mean, I just don't bother. It's kind of like there's this Unitarian I know. His name's Taylor Stewart. And anyway.
Yeah, no, I don't care. I just don't think you're capable of giving any kind of.
What I'm saying is he's also a
real
flat
critique.
earther, right? So I say all these things, and I tell him, this is what you believe, this is what you believe. He's all like, signs off. And you believe the earth is flat. Like, I'll throw that in there, right? Kind of like, and he'll say, yeah, right? And then sometimes it'll be just Jesus mythicist, and I'll tell him this, you believe that, and you believe Jesus never existed, right? And he'll go, yeah. So I kind of like, I don't debate with them on that subject, and I'm sure.
You have no critique. Right.
No, it's not that. I just don't bother.
He's trying to say.
Yeah, I don't believe you have any critique.
Right, he's trying to say it's so ridiculous it doesn't warrant critique. That's why he's lumping in it with flat earthers and
Something like that. Yes, exactly.
yeah, because you're an asshole, John.
It's just hand waving.
Yeah, I can accept that.
Yeah, you're kind of pathetic. Jack, you want to talk about language of thought?
What about it?
we were just talking about whether or not cats have beliefs, and that they can't have beliefs because they don't have language, or at least language of thought, or maybe cats do, but other creatures don't. They can't have any propositional attitudes without it. Blibbity blobbity blue.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's going to be one issue, is whether you think propositions are linguistic entities. So if you do, and you don't think cats have language, then you're not going to be able to ascribe propositional attitudes to them.
Right.
That's going to be one issue. Another issue is going to have to do with second order beliefs.
Yeah. Probably
might
really going to lose
think-
me.
You might think, as I do, that second order belief about a first order belief is a constitutive feature of a belief. So if you didn't have a second order belief, that you had a first order belief, and vice versa, you just wouldn't have a belief. And so if you don't think cats have second order beliefs, and you have that view of beliefs, then you're not going to think that cats have beliefs or propositional attitudes in general. So that's going to be another issue.
So if you don't think that cats have second order beliefs, what do you call the first order beliefs of a cat, if not?
Yeah, so on my view, beliefs and desires are normative, and I would contrast normative states with dispositions.
Mhm.
So I would say that what cats have are dispositions rather than beliefs.
Yeah. um, I don't know why. I just can't see rejecting the, what do we call them? Thoughts? Or, it's kind of strange to say normative dispositions, but I can't discount that from say cats.
JJ, can you bring Tom up?
Why am I the only moderator? Yes, my king.
What do you mean, why are you the only moderator? You're the only moderator because he's insisting on talking over Haiti, and then she just left.
Well, to be fair, she was talking over me first, but
Jack, I mean, do you think that there's any way out for John on this glory thing? I mean, it seems like he's kind of fucked.
I don't know where he's going to go with that.
I mean, like, where could he go, though?
It's a piece of cake.
I want to talk to somebody
They're
reasonable,
so
though.
desperate to try to get other Christians to denounce me. That's like funny. They asked me a question, like Chris. I forgot about Chris.
Yeah, I'm not
I forgot
interested in
about
what you
Chris.
say, though, Jack. I'm
There's
interested in
a
what Jack
history
says.
with Chris and I, in case you didn't
I'm
know.
interested in what Jack says, not you. I think it's actually kind of a good argument, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, It's interesting, right? Because, like, with the love and the savior thing, they can say stuff like, those are dispositional properties. So, like, in a possible world where they create, those properties will be expressed, right? That
Right.
it's possible for them not to create, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the property of being disposed to love or disposed to save, right? Um, but with glory, it doesn't seem to work that way.
You're talking about John's particular conception?
Well, I'm not even clear on what that is, but
That's fair.
but it just seems
It
like
doesn't include maximal glory. We can begin there.
Well, maximal glory excuse me. God. Maximal glory would just be to have the checkbox. Can you elaborate on that, Jack? Like, what do you mean by it's different from like loving or something like that? See, the theist wants to say before create. I'm sorry, I just went for a run and like my throat's really dry. Theist wants to say that before creation, God wasn't. Well, they will say that the persons of the Trinity were loving each other. That's what like EF would say, right? That's how he gets around it.
yeah.
So John plays that same card. Persons of the Trinity are glorifying each other. That's okay too. But then to create human beings for glorification, if glory is binary, is just irrational.
Yeah, that's going to be one
Straightforwardly.
issue.
What exactly do you imagine, Tom, when
each other, though?
yeah, what exactly do you imagine, Tom, when the term give glory? Like, what do you imagine?
I say glorifying each other.
No. Like, for example, when a human being gives God glory, like, what do you imagine that goes on?
They give praise, reverence, and worship. And like edifies God or something like that.
So, in other words, like, do you see some sort of transaction, or do you see, like, what do you imagine? Do you see some
I mean,
sort
what do I
of
imagine? I just
material
described it.
object entering the hands or lap of God? I mean, what do you actually imagine?
I don't know. I don't have an opinion about the ontology of glory.
It's definitely a transaction.
Oh, definitely a transaction, he's saying?
Yeah. Of course. What else would you call it? And I'm just using the English language, John.
See, but it's interesting about this, Jack, is like, look how upset he gets about it.
Yeah, I've been
Sometimes
trying to figure that out, too.
He must really see it as a threat, I guess.
No, it's your incessant need to misrepresent something that, I mean, like, I think James said it best. I mean, there's plenty of things to really just,
James says say anything
go
at
after.
all.
This is really not one of them, but I mean, go for it. Yeah, but I'm just saying, Tom, you're so bent on it. You see a clear contradiction there, but you don't realize this is a contradiction of your own construction. It's a straw man, and you just love tearing down the straw man, but you're not even here to listen to what someone's view is.
Oh, this is just more meta.
to
I see.
debate it.
See, like, Jack? What do you like to psychologize, John? Like, you know, like, what do you think this is right now?
Yeah, I've been trying to figure that out.
I think it's just like a cope.
Yeah, well, I think it's very important for him to like take a dismissive attitude so that he doesn't appear vulnerable.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, I'll say it this way: like, it's not a matter of me dismissing it, Jack. There are some things that are ridiculous, some of which, like JJ, maybe brought up today, but that's a whole different other story. Like this one, it's more of like what he views as a contradiction, and so I mean, it's clear, obviously, what he's thinking, right? Is he lacking glory that he created people? All of these reasoning, but rather, I get it, and if Christians sign off to that erroneously, well, then there's a contradiction, right? But I'm not signing off to it at all, not even a little, right? And every time I try to explain it, he cuts me off. He wants to debate it. He wants to just force his view that there has to be some sort of maximum glory, because by maximum glory and the lack and whatever he's reasoning.
See how I didn't say any of that, Jack, and he's still trying to say that I said. What do you make of that?
And then so when I try
Like,
to
you remember,
explain
I
it
was
to
just
you,
explaining the view to you as binary, just
you're
off and
not even
on,
listening.
and now you see him here trying to represent my criticism as a maximum like spectrum. What do you make of that, Jack?
Well, he likes to see when he thinks he catches somebody in something, he likes to seize on it and bring it up. And it's weird, he has difficulty letting it go, even when it's been sort of shown that, it's, not really a successful criticism for whatever reason. He like just keeps bringing it up. I mean, EF does the same thing actually. Like you can expose some problem in his view, and he won't have an answer. But it's like very hard for him to drop the solution.
Well,
He'll
he's
just
not
keep
even
bringing
doing
it
an
up.
internal critique, Jack. It's a complete external critique, and he's wants to debate it.
I don't know what the see. Why is he saying it's an external critique?
That I don't understand.
So if I don't agree to maximum glory, why do you always insist?
See, there he goes again, Jack. See, did you hear that?
Yeah, well, one thing that I've noticed with John is he has this confusion between rejecting a term and rejecting a concept, right? So if you like ascribe to him some concept by using a term that he rejects, he'll say you're straw manning him.
I'm rejecting both, Jack. Both the concept and the term.
Which is funny. So, like, I made it known that I accept that John's view is not glory is not on a spectrum. It's not on a continuum. It's a binary quality attribute. It's either on or off, and that's it. And now, 2 or 3 times he's accused me of saying that I'm trying to represent his view as maximum or like some kind of spectrum. Now, what do you make of that? He's probably going to do it again.
Well, that's the same thing with Darth. The same thing I was pointing out about Darth, like you'll say to him, falsification is not a theory of meaning, right? And then he'll just keep repeating that falsificationism is just the verificationist theory of meaning. It's like he just can't drop it because.
So you're willing to let go. I don't ever have to hear you say maximum
He can't.
again.
He can't. He can't
See,
drop.
he can't drop it. He can't do it.
And in Darth's case, sometimes he gets it from like a pedigreed source, like a prominent Christian philosopher or something, and so it's like very hard for him to drop it.
So after 3 days, you're finally willing to drop it? Then that's great.
Here he is again. I've been saying this whole time that it's binary.
And then, so when you ask me, the binary, does God lack glory? And I said, no. And then you would say, well, the entailment of that is such that God has maximal glory. You do agree that you try to argue that for days, right?
Oh, well,
Yeah, we talked about that a lot. Yeah.
I mean, I reiterated to Tom dropped the maximal stuff, and I persisted in asking you if God cannot have more than you're just describing maximal glory, the point at which God cannot have more glory.
And then so what I also
And you just can't
Yeah.
get with that.
And so
Yeah,
what
but
I
also,
mentioned-
even if it's binary, having the quality would mean maximal.
right. And so if it's a case that
Right.
Nothing wrong with that.
you asked the question because because the binary you said was maximal glory or not maximal glory, right? And then
No, the dichotomy that I said
the
was that.
dichotomy, exactly. And so what
Dropping the maximal, though,
You're
he
not
said if
even
it's just a
letting me finish.
binary. No, well, I'm correcting you already because you're already
Or
wrong.
not letting me finish.
Well, no,
right?
you're just
So-
wrong already.
So when it came to not maximum glory, right?
Why are you still talking about
there-
maximum?
Weird, see how he's still doing it, Jack?
medium glory, there was minimal glory, and
This is all irrelevant.
glory. There's 4 different options.
Jack, what do you make of
It's
this
all been
now?
dropped already.
Right? And then
Tell me it's all been dropped.
He can't help himself.
When you
Jack.
asked me,
No. The binary.
if God lacked any glory, and I said no, right? You couldn't have it at no minimum glory, which is not maximum glory, right? You couldn't do
What's
that.
he talking
You
about?
couldn't have medium
He's
glory,
talking
which
about
is
the
not
maximum and the minimum glory,
right?
which is
You
irrelevant. at
immediately
this point.
went to the other.
Nobody's talking about
short
that
circuit.
anymore.
It's like short circuiting,
maximum
Jack.
glory.
we're-
We actually argued this
we're
for
done.
days, Tom.
We're
days.
done with that. Because you
But I'm
can't
glad. I'm
you
glad
can't
you finally
concede
let
that
it go.
not needing more,
Finally glad
not
you
being
let
able
that
to
go.
have more is
That was
maximum.
hard for you to let it go, Tom, but I'm glad you did.
He's talking to me about letting it go.
So back to John Lee. No more maximal. It's just a binary of having glory or not having.
There you go.
Right.
Well, the only
It took 3 days for that, really, people?
So God has glory.
It took 3 days for this.
So God has glory. Yeah, John?
Yes, God has glory.
So how can God get glory if he has it already?
You mean how can the glory that God has be recognized by his creation? Something like that? Acknowledged?
No.
Revered?
How can God be given glory if he has it
Is that
already?
what you're asking?
Well, how can God have be given glory if he has it
I
already?
just literally gave you 3 examples.
Wow, did I just miss it?
I don't know if you're listening. I do know that you guys are not listening that much. I do.
What was the one example? Just give me one example.
Just imagine how long it took for one thing to Chet, and even right now, as I'm trying
Yeah,
to
drop it.
explain what I'm
Just
saying,
one
you're
example.
like literally talking every time, and then
He can't stop himself.
But the funny thing is, like your minds are running and running and
Just
running.
waiting for one example.
with certain assumptions.
Jack, look at him.
that
He
I'm
can't stop.
not
Waiting for one
asking
example.
You to just listen. You don't listen.
Listening for one example.
And then you complain that I don't even tell you what I'm trying to tell you.
Still not telling.
Jack.
Yep.
Jack, look at him. He's kill screening.
Yeah.
You said you gave 3 examples. What's one example?
You didn't hear me?
I don't think so.
They were formed in a question.
Oh, I don't think questions are examples, but
They were rhetorical
Maybe that's why I missed
questions,
them.
JJ.
well, give me one of them.
Recognizing majesty.
That's not a question.
It was formed in a question. Okay?
Recognizing majesty
Glory, right?
is God receiving glory.
Humans glorifying
What?
God, right?
I think Tommy's
Recognizing
broken,
God's
Jack.
majesty, right? That's what I'm trying to say. That's just one example. There's many. That is.
Well, let me try to understand the one example.
Look. Every time I say something, you're just talking. I don't even know why I even bother, JJ. And then you ask me, you act like I never said anything because you're not even listening.
No, I'm listening. I'm trying to understand.
If you're listening,
In my
why
listening-
are you talking? Why are you even unmuted?
Typically, it's to ask you to clarify what you mean. That's why I'm talking.
You're literally talking over me every time. Listen, you don't even mute up.
Yep. So something about majesty.
I'll tell you.
Can you elaborate?
Maybe tomorrow we can continue it. Because tonight, seriously, JJ, I'm really trying. You've been doing this like literally for actually 2 or 3 days.
Uh-huh.
And Tom enables that, unfortunately. And
2 or 3 days.
He actually instigates other people to cause mass confusion and over talking and trolling. And that's just what he does. That's fine.
All my fault, Jack.
But
Jack's all my fault.
I haven't even been here a day.
Conversation about glory, that's for sure.
This
I
whole
haven't even been here a day. So God has glory, but can still get glory. Even though he has it.
I already asked the question, how, Tom, earlier conversation on this stage, how do you imagine God receiving glory, right?
By being given it.
And he said transactional, right? And
I said transactional. He didn't say
I view it, is
transactional.
what I said.
No,
Right.
I said it's transactional.
Actually, he did.
Tom, when did you say it was transactional?
And then when I tried to proceed on how I...
No, you asked him. You asked him if it's transactional. Yeah, because I'm remembering. Tom didn't say it was transactional. You asked him if it's transactional. And I said, yes, it is. Tom didn't. He said he didn't know about it.
That's correct.
Yeah. I remember what happened.
Well, wait a minute, Tom. You're saying that you didn't say it like absolutely?
No, I said certainly it's
That was
transactional.
JJ.
So you don't have a position on... Because I was asking you, right, Tom?
Well, he gave you his position.
What is your position?
I never said the word transactional.
He didn't. And
So what is your view on that?
Said that we give glory to God.
Yeah, so what do you imagine is being given? How do you imagine it?
Glory, praise, worship, reverence.
Elliot, Tom said he didn't know what the ontology of it was.
So
He didn't care.
you're trying to go along with my position now, what I've been trying to tell you. You're signing off, finally you're coming to my camp. Is this
No, I've always been representing you pretty much correctly.
So you're signing off to what I'm
You've just
telling
been bitching about being strawman when I was actually faithfully representing your position.
No, I'm asking you, are you willing to accept that's how it's understood? Or do you want to debate it?
What does that mean? How it's understood? I don't have an interest in that. I don't have a say on that. I'm just going by what I'm just saying.
Okay,
a critique of your view.
So you don't want to debate about something different. You want to know my position. You're listening. You're steel manning me, and then you're looking
That's nothing new.
examining it, and
That's
then
not a
you're
new
looking
thing,
for
yeah.
some sort of incoherence or flaws or contradictions.
As usual.
That's what you're doing,
Yeah,
right, Tom?
standard.
That's honorable. Okay, what you've been doing for the past few days is not that.
I think it is.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we've been doing here, man.
You keep confusing things that I say with things that Tom says. I'm more radical.
Oh, I see.
I have no problem with saying that it's transactional. I don't know why you would say it's not.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, JJ, no offense, but I don't feel like talking to you about this tonight.
Okay.
Aw, similar.
That's an invalid opinion. Is your position that it's not transsexual, John? Because that's funny to me.
So, I mean, when you look at some of the scripture, you know, magnifying God, praising God, revering God, right? This is all part and parcel of giving God glory, right? And so
Magnifying God would seem to
transaction.
suggest it's on the spectrum, so that's bad for you.
No, it's not. Listen,
That was
all
brought
you
up
have to-
by-
all
You can't
have to do-
magnify something that's just
listen,
either off or
all
on.
you have to do, Tom, is take in the information, right? Write it down if you need to, right? I'm glad you are, rather than trying to
All
make
you
it.
have to do.
Even right now, you're saying that's a problem. You're already ready to debate something as if there's a problem here, right? You're convinced there's a problem. Instead of just
Yeah, there's a problem, all right.
listening and saying, okay, there's the P and not P here. You're not even doing that. You're already working your little mind and making these assumptions. The assumptions are the real problem, and the assumptions that you make are not what I'm saying. That's where the frustration lies.
Which
I don't know
assumptions?
And it's just disingenuous. It's motivated.
Well,
like clear.
the problem,
Like
it doesn't necessarily have to be a
I'm
contradiction.
motivated.
Like I was saying, I think it's just irrational. But God's not irrational, so I guess that would be a contradiction where God is perfectly rational and not perfectly rational. So that would be the P and not P.
We're not even talking about rationality.
You just said that's what you just said.
Why are you even talking?
You said I haven't given the P and not P.
We're talking about what giving glory is. How
You said I
it's
hadn't given the
understood.
P and not P.
Okay, did you get that part? We're looking at my view of how giving glory is understood. I gave you some examples. I gave JJ some examples, and you're already on something about irrationality. Look at you.
That's because you said I didn't give the P and not P. I did. Are you okay?
We're not even talking about the mind of God right now. You do realize this, right?
What does that have to do with anything?
Because as soon as I said something, I said 4 different things, you started to just jump. You got so triggered, you interrupted me. You started reasoning out loud, and then you're talking about how that's a problem for you, and then you're thinking to yourself and saying, God is irrational.
Jack, why is he so triggered by this, of all things? How could this be? I've never seen this trigger.
That for whatever it took you 3 days to get off of something. Right now, you're right.
No. It took you 3 days to come up with this particular micro
You're on the
adjustment.
irrationality of God right now. Listen to yourself.
That's always been part of it.
Yeah, that has always been part of it. That it's irrational for God to create man to give him something he already has.
Yeah,
That's actually the whole thing.
You're just catching up. That's all. That's fine, though, John. That's fine if you're just catching up now.
I don't know how he missed it.
Do you actually think I don't know what you're saying, Tom? What your claims are?
Yes.
Of course, Andrew. You don't have to even repeat it. I'm the one being repetitive because you're not even listening.
That's why, I mean, when you say things like the rationality thing, yeah, of course I think you don't understand. Of course.
Tom, you're reasoning, if it is the case that God is not lacking anything, it is irrational to create something to provide something that one is lacking. That is your reasoning.
What?
Right? Am I correct? Am I
no.
properly steel manning you?
That was totally wrong.
Well, I thought it wasn't about lacking. I thought I was just on or off, right? You don't like the word lacking, right?
You still didn't even respond to what I just asked you.
I responded for him, but I'm right.
I'm trying to tell you where the assumptions are false, why the reasoning is there is no lack here, okay? I don't know how many times James and I said,
Well, right. So then, in that case, God would just be
lacking in
irrational.
glory.
Yeah. Okay.
But your reasoning when you're literally thinking out loud, you're saying God created man so that he can receive glory that he supposedly has, that he's not lacking, but he's receiving as if he's lacking. That's irrational. This is literally what you're reasoning, and I've told you this. So just if you could just set that aside and just listen to what
It's already been set
told,
aside.
and if you do,
That's already
you'll
been
see
set
that
aside.
there are no internal contradictions, but your assumptions that you're making, right, are first and foremost transactional in a sense. You're claiming non-transactional, but you're thinking person A has little hands.
He hasn't
full of
claimed
glory in his hand,
non-transactional.
and he's given it to God, right? And then you're imagining lack because you're imagining transactional, just like JJ
No.
is, but you're denying that you're envisioning transactional. That's the problem that you're having.
He hasn't talked at all about transactional. I did.
He did right now, JJ. If you listen to, I don't know if you're even listening. Tom's actually thinking
Yep.
out loud. Are you even listening to him? I noticed that when
Well,
Tom
maybe I just can't hear him.
No, when Tom was talking, right?
Maybe only you can hear him.
When Tom was thinking out loud, JJ, I was listening to. I was ignoring you. You were actually talking over Tom. You didn't even listen to Tom.
Tom, what did you say about transaction?
I think I used the word transaction.
I don't think so either. I think Johnny is hearing things now.
He didn't use the word transaction.
Then why didn't you say he
What
did it?
he's talking about is a transaction, though. When he's talking about lacking, giving.
Well, the lacking part is irrelevant. Giving is a transaction. Right?
It is relevant because what Tom is saying, he's reasoning as to if God is creating for this purpose, it's irrational. And the problem is the conditional premise is a false premise, right? That's what I'm trying.
What?
But he won't let it go because he's thinking in terms of transaction. I mean, this is just.
You're thinking in terms of transaction.
I mean, it's like cognitive dissonance, like beyond.
Are you saying that giving is not a transaction?
I'm not talking to you about your position, JJ. I'm talking about Tom. I'm still.
Tom hasn't talked about transactions. You brought it up, and I assented to it.
We're not talking.
Tom said he doesn't know about whether it's a transaction.
We're not talking about.
He said he doesn't know anything about the ontos of it. Doesn't matter to him.
I'm talking about Tom and what he's saying. That you're not even listening to him, and then you're representing him falsely.
I don't think so.
Yeah, he's really just all out of sorts.
I think you're representing him falsely in saying that he's talking about it as a transaction, and he hasn't. That was me. Again.
It's actually both.
He hasn't said transaction once.
You're right. He didn't, right? But if you just think about his reasoning process, about the lack, about the giving, about the reasoning of God, he's thinking in the minds of God. He's saying, this God is irrational.
He's not saying it.
This is literally what he thought out loud, JJ, that you didn't even listen.
Huh. I feel like I should be worried about you, John.
Yeah, I'm worried, man. I'm worried about John. It's not normal.
But what's the good? I'll just pray about
He's
it.
acting really kooky, man. John, are you okay, man?
Is it me?
Scory thing might have might have really shaken his faith.
It's really sad.
I mean, I didn't mean for it to.
Well, I'll tell you what, the progress at least is slow, but there's progress, and that I'm grateful for. You got out that maximal glory thing. That's reason to celebrate after 3 days.
Thank goodness.
Now I'm hoping to move on to the next point, which is about the transaction that you're not acknowledging, but that clearly you're thinking.
Oh no. You're not saying it, but I know, and you know you're thinking it, Tom. You may not know you're thinking it, Tom, but I know you're thinking it.
Tom, I'm trying to mix this track. Could you keep your thoughts down a little bit? They're so loud and dirty.
It really is a little worrisome, though.
Really worried about John. Making a lot of sense.
Some might say not a lick. Probably not fair.
I'm actually encouraged. I see genuine progress.
I don't. Not with you, I mean. I think you're regressing.
Yeah. I don't think that's a stretch.
Are you talking about something other than this topic of glory, Tom? Because I'm talking about the topic of glory. I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, but I think your view of glory might be heretical. I just can't see like other Christians signing off that like glory is a great making property and like God is not maximally glorified.
Chris Claus, he's probably been a Christian like 2 years or something. I've been a Christian 3 decades, Tom. Right, and I've read the Bible many times over, right, and what he came up here to say about that question that he asked, I answered him properly. I don't know how long he was down there. There's a history between him and I. He's calling me a liar, whatever. He's saying that I was somehow misrepresenting, that I was lying, even though I was accurate. I mean, this is what we're dealing with, Tom, and this is what you invite, and this is what you want to, for whatever reason, manufacture. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, but John, you ever think that Christians think you're a fucking heretic?
Yeah, I disagree with that. I think actually a lot of Christians on Clubhouse are uneducated and not deliberately, but through their ignorance, they are heretical. Now, as far as Silverstar, he is not ignorant, right? But he's disingenuous and trying to misrepresent heresy. But that's him, right? No one else is like that on Clubhouse that I could think of. And then when it comes to Jesse, there is nothing heretical. His issues are something different.
No, he definitely thinks
his issues about his accepting Christianity with these hypotheticals, and the other objection that he had was that I'm not listening to what he's saying in the sense of, his law.
Look, if you
opinion is wrong. So
Hey,
These are the issues that
bud.
Jesse. If
Bud.
you ask him about some doctrinal differences
Bud,
that he has with me, he's not going to
Bud,
give you almost nothing. He's going to give you
Bud,
nothing.
Bud. Hey, Bud. I'm always down for testing theories. So if you want to like bring a Christian in here, you move down to the audience. We decide an agreed upon way in which I'll ask the question and we get an objective answer. I'm for it all day. Yeah, but you got to go down to the audience because you can't control yourself. I know that much.
I have no problem going down to the audience. I
Cool,
mean,
cool.
but even when Chris was here, I was really ready to mute up, but then he not only backed out of it, he started to indicate, well, I'm not really that good at philosophy, and for whatever reason.
Well, that's
like on
irrelevant
this
because
particular topic,
even you yourself say that.
on
Yeah,
this particular topic, it is not a case of I don't know. If I don't know, I don't have a problem saying I didn't know. He was upset. I was not saying I don't know. That was his problem, not mine.
You know what's so funny about this, Jack? Is I see John and Matt Adams in the chat like day in and day out. They even type it out. They go, theology is greater than philosophy, and then they have like this hierarchy.
Amen.
And then when this guy comes in and he's just spitting theology, he's getting criticized
You gotta
by
be
John.
kidding me.
Like, oh, he even said himself that he's not good at philosophy. He even said it himself. So like
theology.
Yeah, but the point is that you were using his self-professed like
He's like a new
shortcomings in philosophy as a dig, but you don't even think that.
As far as that guy, he has some skills, and you know what those skills are? It's not theology. His skills are Muslim.
You're missing the entire
Islamic
point,
polemics,
right?
Okay, this is what he's good at. He's good at going after Muslims on the Quran. I've learned from him many things. I know when someone knows something, he does know things. Okay.
What is he doing now, Jack?
When it comes to theology, Tom, he's inept. I have no problem saying that, but he thinks he could sit there in the audience and pretend that I'm saying something wrong or heretical. That's laughable.
This is the Darth Dawkins thing where you try to like run down the person who's embarrassed you in some way, you know.
Yeah.
Were you there, Jack, when he came up in criticism and accused me of lying and stuff like that?
I heard very little of it.
Wait, when?
He asked me a question in chat.
When?
And Tom asked me the question. I answered properly.
I'll just move you down if you don't answer. I'm not in the mood for your bullshit.
I even knew where his question came from. I know the whole...
What is that, Jack? You know what? You're blocked from the room. You know, I'm going to block you because I know you're going to snivel to me right now. I'm going to block you.
This is like so Darth Dawkins.
And then I'll block you from the room.
So Darth Dawkins, what he's doing.
All I needed to do was answer the question. I'm not just going to sit there and listen to an entire story. I don't know what fucking... Is he talking about today?
Yeah.
I just said that.
Chris, what's his noodle? Like...
He should have just said that immediately.
But he wanted out, so he didn't. Allowed himself to be removed, so he doesn't have to talk about it anymore.
It's interesting to contrast somebody like Danny with people like John Lee and Matt Adams, you know. Because you could expose some kind of inconsistency in their view, in Danny's view, you know. And he would clearly be troubled by it, you know. And he would, like, probably be tormented for months. I think there were probably months at a time where he was struggling with some theological question, trying to make sense of it. But he just wouldn't resort to this grandstanding and, mischaracterization and well poisoning and all these tactics.
I think I'm just gonna leave John Lee blocked because anytime I kick him, which I have to oftentimes mute or something, he always tries to troll me by putting emojis and DMing me haha, you're so triggered, and so that's really childish shit. And I don't even want to give him that satisfaction.
But it's hard to think of anybody who's like Danny. At least that you guys would know. I mean, I've encountered a couple of people, maybe 3 or 4 over the years, who were like that. But,
So, yeah, I agree with you. There's not Danny is a rare, very rare find.
I mean,
very
even
special.
even somebody like Converse, right, is not like Danny.
Yeah, well, that's agreed.
He
So,
can't,
just so you guys don't know, this is kind of important because tomorrow, I'm premiering this video with Eli Ayala. So you guys all remember that, right? That happened. Day I made the video. 61 days later, he has not come back. So I just straight up titled the video, Professional Apologist Eli Ayala Can't Support the First Premise of his art. And that will premiere tomorrow. And I hope that makes him react. He can maybe make his own video. He can come in here, whatever he wants to do. I mean, but that's not going to go unnoticed or unaddressed. So yeah, I absolutely made the video. And I think it's fucking hilarious, right? It's fucking hilarious.
I'm in
Actually,
that video, right?
Yes, you are in that video, and there's a lot of people in that video. Josh is in that video. I'm in that video.
Oh, right.
You're in that video, and then Detroiter actually comes in. He's the last person talking, and he actually no. Detroiter actually. I gotta say, I was listening to that. I was like, Detroiter's nailing this. He really nailed it. So that was great. Yeah. I mean, since John Lee's gone, if you want, I can just play it while people are kind of winding down and going to sleep. Without thinking anything much is going to happen now that we blocked John from the room. You guys want to listen to it? Advanced screening?
Yeah, that's cool.
Because tomorrow there might be a reaction to this video. So,
I won't be around tomorrow for the premiere, so I'd like to hear it now. That'd be cool.
You're pretty confident it'll get back to him, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. I've never seen you come around these parts. What explains that, Eli?
Oh, I have 3 little kids, and so I'm normally not available. So late at night when I'm by myself, every now and then I'll pop in and give a listen to what people are talking about. So
I don't think I've ever seen you come into a room that, like, most of these atheists are in. I've only seen you in, like, a Darth room or
yeah,
associates room.
I usually I'm kind of new to Clubhouse, so when I pop in, I'm connected with rooms of people that I know from Discord. So I happen to see Matt here, and I know when Matt's around, the conversations are pretty interesting. So I just popped in. That's all.
Yeah, Matt Adams and I tomorrow are going to be debating on the problem of evil, and we're going to start doing debates regularly. Would you be interested in debating?
Maybe not. I usually like to prepare for. I don't do a lot of like informal, organized debates because I like to prep, and I normally don't have time to prep. So I've turned down a number of debates that have been offered over the past couple of months. So I like discussions and stuff, but not necessarily like, hey, tomorrow we're going to debate this topic, fill in the blank. I don't typically
have to be a like big production or anything. We'd be happy to have a discussion.
Well, I suppose if I'm in a room and someone wants to ask questions or talk about a topic, I suppose I'm down to have a conversation. I can't plan ahead of time, so tonight that I'm on it, I didn't know I was going to be on it. I never really know when I'm going to be on because I kind of run with the flow of my family and having 3 little kids and other responsibilities, so I try to hop on when I have the time. So I can't commit to being on at a specific time. So if you guys were like, hey, tomorrow we're going to talk about A, B, and C at such and such a time, I couldn't guarantee that I'd be able to do that. I just kind of hop on when I have the time.
Well, fair enough, but I got to ask you one question while you're in here. You know what it is, right?
I have no idea.
You know what it is. You know it's coming, right?
I have no idea.
The Christian God exists because...
Okay.
The Christian God exists because... The Christian God exists because...
You gotta say it.
Hey, Eli. I'm Haley. I don't think we've met.
Hello.
No, I'm serious. I want to know.
I know. I was about to ask him to answer the question. I'm just kidding. But would you like to?
The question you just asked, I thought you were doing an impression of Darth Dawkins. I didn't know you were asking a serious question.
Well, he doesn't ask that question.
I think I've heard him say it in some context. The Christian God exists because...
No, he says God does not exist because...
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, to be perfectly honest, I think that God exists because he's revealed himself. So he's revealed himself such that we could know that he exists. That's a simple answer to it. To which
I was talking... sorry.
To which then someone could respond, well, how do we know he's revealed himself? And then we're off running into a broader discussion. But simple answer.
No, that's the wrong question. That's going too fast. Yeah, I had this... This was brought up just a couple days ago with Beckel, right?
Okay.
And what do you mean by reveal?
What do you mean by reveal? Well, to reveal something is to uncover something or to bring to someone's attention something that would have otherwise been unknown. So God has revealed himself both in general and special revelation. And I would say...
Okay, let's talk about...
I would say that
the general revelation would be something like flower, right?
Or the created order.
Right, flower would be one amongst the set of created orders, correct?
The flowers, the trees, the birds, and the bees, yep.
Okay, so you see a flower, and then conclusion, therefore, the Christian God. Can you fill in the blank?
Yeah, so that scenario there actually presupposes that knowledge of God is mediate, so that it's mediated through what we observe and then we come to a conclusion. Within the Christian worldview, the knowledge of God is both mediate, we look and see, but it's also immediate, that we have an immediate knowledge of God, given that we ourselves as human beings are an aspect of God's revelation. So I would say...
So you have innate knowledge, right?
Innate knowledge, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So let's just bracket that, the innate knowledge. Let's talk about the knowledge, the other type of knowledge, right? Where you see the flower, something, therefore Christian God. Can you walk me through that?
Well, I don't say therefore Christian God. So I would say that if we have a knowledge of God, then God is not a conclusion to a line of reasoning. He's the necessary prerequisite for any reasoning whatsoever. And that's where you get the whole transcendental aspect of this sort of discussion. And that, that comes hand in hand with the concept of innate knowledge. So I wouldn't give a transcendental argument for God if I didn't believe knowledge of God was also innate.
Okay, but I thought I said let's bracket innate knowledge, and then I asked you about the flower, which is the not innate knowledge. And when you answered that, you talked about innate knowledge.
Sure.
But I want to talk about.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I want to talk about the general revelation of the flower.
Well, I wouldn't bracket them because I think they go hand in hand. So without the innate knowledge, I would argue that one would lack the necessary preconditions to make sense out of the revelatory nature of a flower.
Isn't innate knowledge special revelation?
And I think I wouldn't know exactly. I'd have to think about how we would divvy that up. But I would say that natural revelation, general revelation, pertains to the knowledge that revelation that all men have. And so I would say that the fact that we are image bearers of God is general revelation, but of course, because God reveals himself more, it can kind of touch on the areas of special revelation.
Okay, well, that's what I want to know about. Well, the general revelation, right? So it seems like when you say you look at a flower, you just innately know that, therefore, Christian God.
I would say that we know that God exists prior to looking at a flower. So if you were to pluck my eyes out, I still have a knowledge of God. It's not based upon what I observe. That which what I observe is a part of the revelation, but it's not the thing I look at and then conclude, therefore.
Right, so in what sense does the flower reveal God then?
Well, number one, our very capacity to interpret flower presupposes categories that I would say require a knowledge of God. And the very nature of the thing itself gives evidence of a creator. Take that coupled with our innate knowledge of God.
There we go. It's evidence of a creator. That's some kind of inference, right?
Yes, and knowledge of God is both inferential and innate.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the inferential part. Mm-hmm. Can you walk me through that?
All right. What would you like to know?
The inference where you go from flower to God exists.
Well, again, I'm not going to bracket innate knowledge because I think it's a necessary prerequisite. So I don't know how to talk about a flower independent of the innate knowledge that we have, since it's a necessary precondition to see the flower as an extended revelation of God in the external sense.
I know how. You could tell me what the inference is.
I don't know what you're talking about. In terms of the innate context, the intellectual context necessary to interpret a flower, the inference is both we have a knowledge of God, and when we look at the created order, we see evidence of we see further evidence of the God that we innately know.
Right. What's that evidence?
What do you mean? What's that evidence? The flower is evidence of the Maker. I can give an argument.
You said you look at the flower and you have innate knowledge, and we see evidential.
We don't look at the flower and then we have innate knowledge. We have innate knowledge in light of the fact that we're image bearers of God.
Right.
So you have innate knowledge of God. You have innate knowledge of God, and so there's evidence of God within us, and there's evidence of God without us, and they work together. I cannot make sense out of the one without already having the knowledge of God innately. So I can't.
Right. I'm asking about. You said we have evidence within us, and we have evidence without us. What is the evidence without us? Flower, therefore God.
I can't talk about the evidence without us without already talking about the evidence within us. They both go hand in hand. Once I separate and talk about one without the other, then I've cut off the link that provides the necessary preconditions for properly interpreting external reality.
Okay, so you look at a flower, you have innate knowledge that, therefore God.
That the Maker has made the flower. The Maker that I know innately has made that flower, yeah.
Right, okay, granted, whatever. But what's the evidence part? Because you were looking at it
again, evidence. If you're talking about evidence and you want me to walk you through understanding how a flower is evidence, I can't do that independent of a framework. And that framework includes my innate knowledge of God. So I can't...
Okay, so you have innate knowledge of God. I'm granting that.
Right, but you're creatively asking a question in a creative way that would actually force me to answer it as though a flower can be understood independent of the framework that I'm working in. And I would say that's impossible. So,
well, granted the framework, you look at the flower, you already know that it's God, but then you say, apart from the innate knowledge that you have, it's also outside of your innate knowledge. It's like, these are your words, right?
Sure.
And you made this distinction, right? That flower is evidence for God apart from your innate knowledge. Now, I can grant you have innate knowledge that the flower points to God. I'm asking you.
It's not evident. It's not independent of the innate.
Fine. Just explain the other half. That's not the innate part.
I already did. You need innate knowledge and a proper intellectual framework to properly interpret the flower. Without that framework, the flower is not evidence for anything, because there is no.
Yeah, you have that. I'm granting that. So walk me through it.
You
have the innate knowledge. Now walk me through it.
That's right. So as knowing my Creator innately, I could know more about my Creator by looking at what He's created, external to myself.
Right. Oh, great. Oh, great. So now you look at the flower. Now you can know more. And here's the inference. Go ahead.
I'm not sure what you mean by inference. When I see, for example, if I know someone and I'm equipped with certain intellectual capacities, right? When I observe the world around me, I see things that are fingerprints, so to speak, of the maker that I know. How do I know that? Well, by the impossibility of the contrary. If I reject that I could know that, then I undercut my innate knowledge and the necessity of those innate categories to make sense out of the external world. I don't see how that's I mean, one could disagree with what I'm saying, but I don't see how that's difficult to follow. It seems like you're trying to place a wedge between innate knowledge and then how the external world makes sense or is evidence for something. And
the exact opposite. I granted your innate knowledge, and you said you use that as a framework to further evidence the non-innate knowledge,
right? So
non-innate revelation, and I'm just not hearing anything about what the inference is. How you get from flower to God. I mean, I'm granting innate knowledge as a framework. I'm just not hearing anything.
Well, then the inference, then even if I were to fail to give an inference, is irrelevant to the fact that the flower is evidence, because you need the innate knowledge as a reality to make sense out of anything. So my lack of ability to explain the inference is irrelevant. The fact that the innate categories are presupposed necessarily already grant the point that, however it's inferenced, God is known right at the outset. He must be known to know any flower.
Mr. Ayola, but you made the distinction. You said, we got this innate knowledge, and we got the non-innate knowledge. I've been asking you, I keep asking you about the non-innate knowledge. And
I don't see. Well, I mean, you might not like my answer. That's fine. I'm saying the innate knowledge is necessary to make sense out of the flower. If you grant the innate knowledge, then cool. You grant the innate knowledge. You grant that in order to know a flower, I must have a knowledge of God. Okay? That's evidence enough. In other words, you can't know a flower for anything. You don't have a proper context without the God I'm saying we innately know. I don't need to give an inference, even if I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're asking. But suppose I understand what you're asking, and I don't know how to give an inference from that and answer your question. It's irrelevant to the fact that God is required to make sense out of any inference I might give.
Well, I'm just wondering if you... Sorry. Go
I was going to ask, it's not clear to me what you mean by evidence, so can you sort of explain?
Yeah, that's another, I guess I should have asked that question. What do you mean by evidence when you say, how is the flower evidence for God?
What do you think it's evidence for God?
I would say that it is a data point that requires God to make sense out of. So the very fact that I can make sense out of anything evidences the God I know innately. So when you say evidence, though, I don't mean evidence purely in like an empirical way. Because if I'm talking about transcendental categories as evidence, they're non-empirical forms of evidence, namely transcendental necessities.
Yeah,
I never talk of evidence independent of transcendental categories, because it would be unintelligible.
So that's not, you haven't told me what you mean by evidence, though. What do you mean by evidence?
I would say that evidence could be a data point that indicates the maker. That I have innate knowledge of.
What does it mean?
So design. So
You
data
say
point
it
can give evidence
indicates.
of it.
Well, when you say it indicates, that just seems to be like saying it's evidence. What does it mean to indicate?
Well, it probably means the same thing you might understand if something indicates another. I'm using it in a very generic.
When I say something,
In other words,
raises the probability.
in other words, a flower or a complex mechanism or something can indicate a designer. But in my case, the designer is not some abstract kind of idea.
Could you just give an inference? Something
Well,
like that.
if that is what you would consider an inference, I'm fine with that. I'm not against giving inferences. I can say that data points in the empirical world, things that we observe, can be inferences of the maker that I know. And
But wait, what's the?
that's what the Bible says. That's what the Bible says. The heavens declare the glory of God.
Wait, but what's the inference?
I guess I don't know what you're asking. If I were to, and we can use kind of notch that it's designed.
Based on the complexity or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, based on complexity, design.
I thought originally. I mean, I can kind of see what you're trying to say. But
By the way, before you continue, that's really all I mean by like, if I'm understanding correctly, right? So when I make an inference, I can infer based upon other categories that I have, categories of design and purpose and teleology and things like that. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
yeah, I thought this started off with me saying the Christian God exists because, and I seem to like making inference to a God.
Nope. I'm talking about the Christian God. I don't think the non-Christian God can make intelligible concepts of design. So now if you're asking for a specific...
I think someone's speaking.
Oh yeah, I do hear something. Someone's
It's
speaking.
hog tie. Jeez, okay,
Did you forget to turn? By the way, I don't know who said it. And I want to give kudos. But someone called me Mr. Ayala, and that is the first time in a long time that I've had an interaction with someone, maybe for the first time, and they've actually got my name correctly.
That was
So
Tom.
kudos to whoever said that.
That was me.
Okay, well, kudos to you, man.
Thank you.
My name gets butchered quite a bit, so I appreciate it. But yeah, so what I was saying with the watch, for example, I'm not making an argument. If I were to construct that into like a syllogism or something, I'm not making that as an argument for a generic designer. So I would further argue, for example, that the Christian God is required for even categories of design. So that would just be an illustration of that's how I would make an inference. But that's not the inference I make to the Christian God, as the Christian God is kind of a conclusion to an argument. That's just an example of inferring teleology. But as a Christian, right, because I have categories, transcendental categories that I use, I have no problem making inferences based upon what I observe to the fact that it's created by my God. But that would be
rendering some kind of transcendental argument. X is necessary for Y, X therefore Y, something like that.
Yeah, I'd make a transcendental argument because I don't think that, say for example, if I were to give simply a teleological argument or a moral argument, without considering broader worldview categories, then those arguments in and of themselves have innate knowledge of God. I already have a knowledge of God. These data.
What would be the support for premise one of your transcendental argument?
I'm sorry?
What would be the support for premise one of your transcendental argument?
Sure. I could argue along the lines, if knowledge is possible, then the Christian worldview is true. Knowledge is possible, therefore the Christian worldview is true. So that would be a transcendental argument in a deductive form in which the first premise is defended transcendentally.
No, I asked you what the support for premise one was, and then you rendered the entire argument.
So the support of it would be that if you deny that first premise, then you would fall into the same categories of skepticism or unintelligibility, and that would have to be demonstrated through the course of conversation. And that I'd also provide a positive argument as to why the Christian God does provide the preconditions for knowledge and intelligible experience.
Yeah, but you have to do more than just say through the course of a conversation, right? Because you have to have a general answer to that question. You have to be able to refute it generally, not just. You have to be able to refute it generally, not just depending on. Because it could be that Tom has an incoherent worldview, or Haiti has an incoherent worldview, but Bob down the street has a coherent atheist worldview, right? So you just have to demonstrate that they're all false without the opinion specific.
That's incorrect. That's incorrect.
If you don't, the problem with you saying that that's incorrect is if someone demonstrates a coherent worldview that accounts for everything that you're saying, then what you're saying is possibly false. You want to say that it's not possibly false. So that's why it is correct.
No, that's incorrect, because it presupposes that the transcendental argument can only be demonstrated by an inductive demonstration of the falsity of all competing worldview perspectives, and that's
no, it's not inductive. You make it deductive, make it abductive. I don't care what you do, but you have to show that all other worldviews are false.
Right, and if you the transcendental argument tries to demonstrate that the Christian worldview provides the necessary preconditions for intelligible experience. Now, here's the thing: if you're asking for, excuse me, if you're trying to provide an ultimate context that grounds intelligible experience, I would argue that you can only have one ultimate foundation for that. You can't have a multiplicity of worldviews that equally and sufficiently demonstrate intelligibility, because then you're stuck in a pluralism, which kind of just leads to a form of skepticism. So I would say that if there is one worldview that does in fact ground those things, you could argue for the fact that it does, then it follows that every other worldview doesn't. Now, if someone disagrees and says, well, what about worldview A, B, or C, then we can talk about those and we can do some worldview analysis to further demonstrate the point. But I would not have to demonstrate the falsity of every single one inductively.
It's not inductive. You do it deductively.
Or deductive.
Yes, you do. You do have to. You have to show that they're false, right? Because you don't believe that contradictions can be true, right? So you don't think that both worldviews can be true. So you have to show that other worldviews are false. We show that other worldviews are false by demonstrating that Christianity does in fact provide the necessary preconditions for intelligibility. If it does,
yeah, but you say
no other worldview can, because you can
but you say that
metaphysical ultimate.
Wait, but hold on, that doesn't.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
That doesn't fall. Let me just.
I just really interject really quickly.
Yeah.
But you said that you established that by.
Can I say timeout real quick? I do apologize. I'm kind of new to Clubhouse, and I know that things can get a little unwieldy. So if someone wants to make a point, if it can just be one at a time, and then I'll try my best to address.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I've been talking for a long time. I'll just make one more point. Sure. And then I'll let Josh talk to you. But keep in mind, I am going to. You have to be nice in order to play with Eli. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. I'm just saying. So if that means that you can't be nice people who talk to Eli and you get sit down, you were warned. Fair warning. And if you can't handle the increased difficulty level, then I'm sorry. You're just not meant to be playing the game. But Eli, I thought you said that you're establishing that it has to be the Christian God. And you're not ruling out all the other worldviews. But you said that you established the necessity of the Christian God by the impossibility of the contrary, which I take it you're using some sort of Van Tillian sense in which you're doing that, which says that you're showing that they're not possible on their own merit, right?
That's one way you illustrate the impossibility of a particular worldview, but the positive demonstration comes in showing that Christianity can ground intelligible experience and knowledge. So if that's true, if Christianity can successfully show that within that worldview you could have knowledge, intelligibility, it doesn't reduce to an utter skepticism, then it follows it must be the only worldview that can do it, because you can't have more than one.
Because something can, it must be the only one?
Case, yes. In this case, yes. When you're talking about transcendental necessities, yes.
I said
this isn't even a debatable. This isn't even a debatable point. This is not something uniquely presuppositional. I mean, we can only have one transcendental. If that's the hypothetical, right? If one could demonstrate the transcendental to be the case, then it must be true. That's just the nature of a transcendental.
Yeah, but we're waiting on the proof.
Wait, I don't understand why.
The proof.
Hold on a second. I just don't understand why something transcendental can't be contingently true also. That doesn't follow. At least you haven't demonstrated that.
Well, the Christian worldview is the nature of the transcendental worldview is unique in the sense that it's not making claims that are based on contingencies. If the Christian worldview is true, I mean, God is, if I could use kind of a pietistic language, God is the Lord over contingencies. There's no contingency or possibility that hangs over him metaphysically. So the nature of the unique claim of the Christian worldview is that it can't be a sort of transcendental that is contingent. It must be necessary given the nature of the Christian God is the greatest, if I can use Anselmian language, the greatest conceivable being.
Yeah, but again, that's not addressing the point I made, right? Because the point I made is that whether or not that's true, that might be true, but it just follows then that if God exists, then God is necessary, right? It doesn't follow that God exists.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Yeah, God, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the point I was making is for something to be transcendental, all that means is it provides the necessary precondition for something or other, right? On this view. Now, it doesn't follow that because something provides the preconditions for something or other, that therefore that thing is necessary. That just straightforwardly doesn't follow. It's a non sequitur. Now, you might be able to give an argument for that, but I've yet to see such an argument, right? So it could be the case that in one possible world, X provides the necessary preconditions for knowledge and intelligibility and what have you, and in another possible world, Y provides the necessary preconditions for knowledge, intelligibility, and whatever, right? And so that's not going to be sufficient for you to say that the Christian God is the only way. You have to show that those other possibilities are in fact impossible. You have to argue that they're contradictory or something.
Well, you're presupposing that there are possibilities that stand over God. The nature of the Christian claim is that God is the necessary precondition for any hypothetical or contingency in any possible world.
Yeah, but I'm asking for the argument.
If you were to say, I'm sorry?
Yeah, but I'm asking for the argument for that claim.
Well, the argument is demonstrated in the fact that the Christian worldview, given special and general revelation, the nature of the Creator and the created order, and the fact that God has revealed himself, right? We could know God's revelation, and that is demonstrated to be true that in rejecting it, one's worldview is reduced to skepticism or absurdity. Now, the response will be, but wait a minute, you just made the statement. Well, then that's where we have to actually get into the weeds and talk about specific worldviews. Not because I have to demonstrate the falsity of them one by one, but simply for the point to illustrate the transcendental point that I made at the beginning. That's why we get into some of the specifics. We try my best to talk to people from different worldviews to illustrate that transcendental point. That's part of the demonstration. The ultimate demonstration is actually showing, well, if Christianity is true, knowledge is possible, intelligible experience is possible, and if that survives the critiques, the internal worldview critiques and things like that, then that's sufficient. Since you only need one transcendental category, you can't have more than one. So in this unique situation, if Christianity is a transcendental category that provides those, then it follows it has to be the only one, because you can only have one. And that's the nature of transcendental argumentation. That's not that'd be true for other forms of transcendental argumentation.
Tom, can we bring Danny up? I'm kind of distracted right now, so can we bring Danny up? Let him finish this guy. Probably Danny has more time than I do right now.
I don't know if you're familiar. I don't know who's talking. If it was Billy or it wasn't Tom. Are you guys familiar with Dr. James Anderson at Reformed Theological Seminary?
I've read his paper.
Yeah, we're familiar with him.
Did you read the one? What's the name of it?
You're talking about the Lord of Non-Contradiction.
I don't know if it was the Lord of Non-Contradiction. I think it was Logic, Therefore God. And I'm not talking about the entirety of the paper. There's a section in the paper where he actually has it's a fairly long deductive argument, but I like it. And I wouldn't have time to unpack it now, but it's definitely an interesting deductive argument for the Trinitarian God along like these transcendental lines that I'm talking about. So you take a look at that paper. I think it's called Logic, Therefore God. You might kind of get a better grip as to every
Yeah, but see, the
direction
problem is that establishing a Trinitarian God by some kind of a priori argument wouldn't establish Christianity. And that's really the burden here. Like, you need to give an argument that doesn't really establish that Trinitarianism is true, but that Christianity is.
Well, the nature of the presuppositional argument is not, we're not necessarily arguing for a simple data point, i.e. the existence of a triune God. The very concept of the triune God is unintelligible apart from a broader worldview context. So the nature of the argument is at the worldview level. It's not at the, slice this abstract category Trinitarian God and argue just on that basis. We're arguing for a worldview system.
Yeah, you keep saying you're arguing for it, but nobody's seen the argument.
Okay.
Yeah, so we just want an argument that establishes that in order for intelligibility or knowledge or whatever to be possible, right, Christianity has to be true. Right.
Okay, well, that was the deductive argument. That was the deductive argument I gave.
Yeah, but
right?
the problem is that you didn't give a reason for anybody to accept the first premise of your argument.
I did give a reason, and then I said...
What was the reason?
In rejecting it, a person's worldview is reduced to absurdity, and they don't have a ground.
That's just a claim. That's just a claim that we're... No, that's just a claim that we're skeptical of, that we want you to establish. So what's the argument that establishes that?
The part of the way it's established is the...
No, I just want the argument.
No, well, that's part of the argument. So for example, you have to understand what the nature of...
No, actually, I just want the argument. Just give me the argument and then its conclusion form.
No, because I'm now giving you an answer to my first premise that you're disagreeing with. The answer is...
I didn't ask a question.
All right.
I just asked for an argument. Is there an argument that establishes that claim is true?
I'm not going to have this sort of conversation. All right. I'm telling you, when I'm defending the first premise as a transcendental premise, okay, if you disagree with the premise, which is what you're supposed to do, if you disagree with the deductive argument, right? When you disagree with the first premise, which is the transcendental premise, you are saying then that Christianity is not the necessary preconditions for knowledge. Okay? Now, how that's demonstrated is you now need to show me, as part of my argument, give me your worldview, and I will demonstrate that given the truth of your worldview, it undermines its own categories. That's the nature.
Yeah, but then you're doing the impossibility of the contrary by showing that a worldview is not true because there's some contradiction on its own grounds. But when I asked you about that, that's what you said you weren't doing. You were saying that you were showing that the other views that are possible are impossible due to the Christian view being necessary. So which is it?
Yes, it's both. That's why I said it's a two-step.
Okay, well, if it's both, then you can give the argument why the Christian God and only the Christian God is the necessary precondition. Go ahead.
Okay. So now when I give my reasoning for that, you're going to disagree, and part of that disagreement is part of the argument. In your disagreement, you're going to have to give a competing worldview system in which I can give an illustration as to why the point of my argument stands. So it's not just me standing here talking. It's the transcendental discussions are worldview analyses. You have to analyze worldviews. It's not just what I'm arguing here.
Go ahead and do it.
Well, I already did. I gave my premises. Well, I disagreed with the first premise. So now I'm saying, fine, give me a worldview that grounds intelligible experience and knowledge.
Is there anything in our background?
That's literally how the first premise is defended. It welcomes competitors to demonstrate that this claim is actually false.
It seems like you would agree with that.
Because of the nature of transcendental arguments, they're indirect arguments. They're indirect. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
So then it seems like you would agree with us that there's nothing that we are committed, there's nothing that we believe that would commit us to that premise.
Well, you don't have to commit yourself to that premise, but part of the engagement with the argument is to actually present a worldview that grounds intelligible experience, and by doing so, you falsify the transcendental premise.
Yeah, so there's two sides of this. They either that I reject the premise and then offer an alternative, or there's something that you would say that I believe that would rationally commit me to the premise, and it seems like you agree with us that there's nothing that...
Can you repeat that again? I'm trying to follow. I don't know if I follow your line of reasoning there. Can you repeat that again, or maybe expand on what you just said?
Yeah, so it seems like the dialectic shifts to either me giving you my view, and then I can be right or wrong about that, and that's what Josh kind of highlighted. Just because I might give you an incoherent position doesn't mean that all things that are non-Christian worldviews are... That's correct. There's that direction, but then there's the other direction that there's a question about whether you and I agree that whether there's anything I believe that would commit me to that premise in question. Seems like you agree with us then, that there's nothing that you can offer to support the premise or that such that we would be committed to the truth of that premise.
Well, again, when you're talking about committed to the truth of that premise, that's going to be very subjective. I mean, there are people who aren't committed to all sorts of premises that are perfectly valid and true.
Yeah, but
And take, for example, an item in which we agree and ask what the necessary preconditions for that item is. And that's precisely what the nature of the argument does. It's asking, for example, if I were to say X is the item we agree on, then we ask what are the necessary preconditions for X. I think that's fair. So I
think we're talking about a different premise. You said that the premise in question was that to reject the initial argument, initial premises of the argument, our worldview amounts to absurdity, and that's what we're skeptical of. And it seems like you're saying that you don't have any line of reasoning to provide as to commit us to the truth of that premise.
Well, my invitation is to demonstrate that premise is wrong, because that's the way it's shifting the burden. It's not shifting the burden of proof for the reason.
We're just asking you whether there's an argument that supports the claim or not. That's just a yes or no question.
No, it's not a yes or no question, because the nature of transcendental arguments is indirect. Now, I told you that if God exists and he reveals himself, he can reveal himself such that we can have a knowledge of his existence through general and special revelation. Okay? We have coherence. We have a worldview context in which individual data points have coherence as they reflect God's creation, his purpose, his intentions for facts and the meaningfulness of facts.
Is that an inference?
Within the Christian worldview, that makes sense out of knowledge.
Yeah, is it an inference? That's what I'm just trying to get clear on. Is that an inference in support of the claim?
That is my claim. That is the nature of my claim.
I'm not asking about the claim. I'm asking if there's an inference that supports it.
Yes, well, the thing that I'm inferring is the transcendental necessity of the point I'm making, which, again, is why I'm asking, if you disagree with that point, I'm asking then why doesn't someone present a worldview that actually combats my first premise? That's the way I'm defending my first premise. The point of my argument is to show, yes, give a competitor, and we can talk about worldview analysis.
Okay,
that's
so
one of
just
the ways
to be clear, is that there is an inference in support of the claim?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, see, I've asked that question multiple times now, and if you didn't understand what I meant, why did you go through that detour rather than just say, I don't know what you mean? Do you understand what an inference is?
Well, if you're saying that I'm coming to a conclusion based on a data point, if that's what you mean by inference, then I guess I think I know what you're talking about. I'm trying my best to kind of understand. I know these words could be ambiguous unless they're clearly defined. If you're saying an inference that you can look at something and then infer or draw a conclusion based upon what I'm observing, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking then.
Yeah, so it's some kind of rule-governed process from a set of premises to a conclusion.
Right? Okay.
by some kind of inference rule, let's say, something like that.
Okay, so if I say that the Christian worldview provides the necessary preconditions for knowledge, and then I say, there's a God, he's revealed himself, the worldview that I'm espousing gives context and meaningfulness to knowledge because data points, okay, like facts, only have meaning as they relate to other facts, so there needs to be a system, a philosophy of fact that undergirds the intelligibility of interpreting data points. Christianity provides that. And so not only must I presuppose that to make sense of what I just said, I could also infer that fact given that because a fact is intelligible, there must be a system of facts that makes it intelligible, and I'm arguing that that's the Christian worldview.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get clear on whether there's an inference that supports the claim that to reject the Christian worldview, one could not have intelligibility.
Because that's the nature of the transcendental, right? If it's by the impossibility of the contrary, it's an indirect proof. So a direct proof would be something like, and I guess in giving a deductive argument, that's a form of direct proof, but indirect proofs don't typically get presented in deductive arguments. The only reason why I gave a direct argument is so people can kind of see the line of reasoning I'm trying to follow. But transcendental arguments are typically indirect. They're proven by the impossibility of the contrary. So it's not inferred in the exact same way you might infer some other fact, because the fact of God is not the same as the fact of any other fact. It's unique in its transcendental necessity.
So is it a yes or a no?
I mean, I don't know how to answer your question if I just explain I think I explained myself the best.
I'm just asking whether there's an inference or not. I've asked that now probably about 6 or 7 times.
And I'm saying that the Christian God is necessary for the intelligibility of inferences.
Yeah, that's the claim. That's the claim that I'm asking if there's an inference in support of. Is there one?
I don't know what you're asking then, and I do apologize.
You don't. So okay. So you didn't understand when I tried to explain what an inference was. You didn't understand.
I thought I did, but I guess I don't. So I do apologize.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. If you don't even understand what an inference is, then I'm just not really sure how the discussion can proceed, right? Because that's what we're interested in, right? You've made a claim, and we're looking for a justification for the claim, and I think the people here are only going to accept an inference as a justification, right? We're not going to accept an appeal to an intuition or something like that, right? So if you don't actually know what an inference is, it's not going to be, we're not going to see how your claim is justified, right, if you don't know how to provide an inference for it.
Okay, well, when you say inference, I'm reading the definition here, and maybe you can help me. Would you agree with this definition of an inference? Am I still on? The sound went off, huh?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought that. So I'm going to read this definition of an inference, and then maybe you guys can tell me if that's what you mean, okay? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so an inference, a conclusion reached on the basis of evidence and reasoning. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I want something a little bit more specific than that, right? I basically want a deductive argument, because I don't think you're making a claim that could be supported inductively or abductively, right? Because you're claiming that all other worldviews necessarily would be self-contradictory or something like that, right?
Well, I'm saying you only have one transcendental. So if one is true, if one perspective is true, then all the other ones must be false.
Yeah, so what I'm interested in is in a deductive argument, right? And so basically what I want are a set of premises that entail a conclusion by some set of inference rules, right? But if you don't actually know what those things are, right? If you don't understand what a deductive argument is, what an inference rule is,
right?
No, that's not the argument in question.
Okay.
Right? I was asking whether there was a deductive argument that establishes the claim that
Okay.
If one were to reject the Christian God, right? One could not have intelligibility. Or
So can I repeat something back to you, and you let me know if that's what you mean, and then I can. Because again, if you're asking for a deductive argument, so for example, I gave a deductive argument. Are you asking for a deductive defense of the first premise?
That's right.
Ah, okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, that would have made sense if someone said it that simply. So I do apologize if that was confusing. I suppose I don't know how to put it in deductive form at this very moment, but I know it has been put, and I have put it in deductive form somewhere. So that's a good point. Now that I understand what you mean, I can go back and try to formulate it, and next time I hop in the room, I can share it. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. But see, the thing is, we're not going to be interested in a question-begging argument. So
that wasn't question. That's not a question-begging argument. There's nothing I said that was question-begging. Absolutely not.
No, I didn't say there's anything you said that was question-begging. I said we're not going to be interested in a question-begging argument.
Of course,
right?
Yeah, no one.
So if you formulate a deductive argument, it's only going to be of interest to us, right? If we accept the premises in the argument, or if you can show us why we need to accept the premises in the argument. Right.
Yeah, that's fine. Of course, yeah. No one's talking about fallaciously question-begging.
But the thing is, plenty of people here have been familiar with presuppositionalist argumentation for a long time, and I'm talking about over 10 years.
Sure.
And we're not aware of there being any such non-question-begging argument literature.
Well, I don't know of any question-begging argument in the literature. I don't know what you're referring to. Transitive arguments are not
You seem to think there isn't a non-question-begging argument that establishes the truth of the Christian worldview that's in the philosophical literature, right? And I just don't know where it is because, there are people who've gone through, Van Til's writings and Greg Bonson's writings and so on, and they've never been able to find that argument. But you sound like you're very confident that the argument exists somewhere.
Right? There is no, in the literature, there is no presuppositional argument in deductive form that's question-begging. Absolutely not.
No, I didn't ask you that. I asked you where the argument is that establishes this. Because you said you formulated it somewhere and it exists elsewhere. Yeah. So I'm just asking, where in the literature is it? Presumably it's in Van Til or Bonson somewhere.
I would say the argument is summarized in Van Til. A lot of people who don't understand, a little bit that's confusing about Van Til is he comes from a continental philosophical tradition in which they're not known for formulating strict deductive arguments. That comes more in the analytic tradition. So that's why you have the difference between Van Til. It can be a little confusing if people don't know that tradition. And you have someone like Bonson and James Anderson, who's more analytical. So
yeah,
probably
James Anderson is not a presuppositionalist.
Yes,
so that's not going to help. No,
he is a presuppositionalist.
No,
I know him personally. Okay. Well, I know him personally. I know he is a presuppositionalist.
But in any case, James Anderson doesn't have an argument that we don't have a good basis to.
Okay. Well, I would.
But so where in Boston
One second. Hold up, time out. Okay, you made a claim there. James Anderson has published peer-reviewed material on transcendental arguments. I have no idea what you're talking about. That's just clearly false.
No, I'm not saying he doesn't have arguments. He has arguments.
And they're not question-begging.
I didn't say they were question-begging. I'm just saying we're familiar with his arguments and we have good grounds to reject them, right? So I think the argument that you want is going to be something stronger than anything James Anderson has to offer. Presumably Bonson has that argument somewhere.
Well, I'm saying that, I'm saying, because Bonson doesn't usually lay out things in deductive form, at least in his writings. It's probably more in his lectures, but it really depends. But it's irrelevant. The points, the main contours of presuppositionalism can be placed in a deductive argument.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking where has it been done? By what scholar? In what text?
Well, James Anderson has put transcendental arguments in deductive form. Now, if you have a basis for rejecting them, that's fine. But to say that they don't exist anywhere,
I wasn't denying that James Anderson had arguments, right? I was just asking where the argument is that you have in mind, right? So in other words, the formalization of Van Til's argument.
Well, there are many formulations of Van Til's argument in John Frame and James Anderson.
Yeah, so where does Frame give the argument in support of the premise that I
don't have the reference.
Form?
I don't have the reference in front of me right now, but if you take a look at
how long would it take
one second. Well, it's not my job to find it. You're asking me to find a reference. I'm not going to run and grab a reference everywhere you ask, but because it's really irrelevant to me. All you need are the basic principles of presuppositionalism, and one could formulate them into a deductive argument if they wish. Now, whether they're able to defend the argument, that's another point. But the fact that they're in deductive form and someone can place them in deductive form, I'm unaware of a deductive presuppositional argument that is question begging. Now, if that's not what you're saying, that's fine, but it's kind of confusing, some of the statements you're making.
I'm saying that we don't know of any place that the support for the first premise, right, appears in non-question begging form in any presuppositionalist literature. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist somewhere. Maybe it does, right? And we just haven't found it yet.
Yeah.
People we know have, gone through Van Til's and Bonson's writings looking for that argument, and they haven't been able to find it. So I'm just asking you where it is.
Yeah, I have to look through references and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just let us know where you find it.
Sure. And I do have a question, though. So you said that you don't know of any non-question begging presuppositional arguments in deductive form. Are you saying, though, that you only know, and you can say that that's not what you're saying, but are you saying that you only know of presuppositional arguments in deductive form that are question begging? Is that what you're saying? Or is that
That's right, yeah. Now that you're here, Troyer, can you comment on whether James Anderson is a presuppositionalist or not?
Can I ask a question? Yeah. Can you give me a reference, if you have a reference, if you have something specific in mind, then it's okay if you don't, where a presuppositional argument by a noted presuppositionalist is given in deductive form and is question begging in one of its premises?
When you say noted presuppositionalist, what do you mean by that?
Okay, someone like a James Anderson, John Frame, Greg Bonson, Tom Notaro, any person who is considered, quote unquote, a leading presuppositional thinker who's written on the subject. Because I would be interested in if you can find a deductive argument with a question-begging premise, that would interest me, because I do study these issues and I try to take note of those things. And it's okay if you don't know a reference.
Well, what's question begging is when they say due to the impossibility of the contrary, right? That we have no reason to reject.
Yeah.
That's we have no reason to accept, right? Only somebody who already agreed with the argument would accept that.
Can I say a couple things, Frank? Would you say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Would you say that all transcendental arguments are question begging?
No.
Okay, so then what you just said makes no sense, because in its form, there is nothing different about a Van Tillian transcendental argument and any other transcendental argument. The form, there's no difference.
Question begging, this has nothing to do with form, though.
Yeah,
I'm talking about the nature of the claim. So if you were to take, for example, a transcendental argument, you say, Y is the necessary precondition for X, right? X, there's no Y. Okay. All right.
Anyway, Victoria, go ahead and say what you were going to say.
Well, I was going to say something about John Frame, but he's sort of a presuppositionalist in the sense that he thinks that God is the necessary precondition for
James Anderson, you mean?
James Anderson. He doesn't, as far as I know, he doesn't really, I wouldn't characterize his arguments as presuppositionalist arguments, from what I've read of him, but he is a presuppositionalist in the first sense, in the sense that he thinks that God is a necessary, whatever.
I just want to say, he categorized himself James Anderson categorizes himself as being somewhere between Greg Bonson and John Frame. So there are some differences. It really depends what one is going to say is a quote-unquote genuine presuppositionalist.
So that was Ben Frame.
Right.
Right? Exactly.
I don't know if that's a joke or, anyway, just quickly on the, because here's the sort of inference that we'd be looking for, that I would be looking for, right? You say that,
And by the way,
we have some data.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. If you can speak slowly, I'm going to jot this down because I'm very much interested in making sure that if I'm saying something unclear, these kind of conversations actually help me clarify. And if there's something like a weakness on how I'm presenting it, I want to know that. So I do appreciate if you guys sorting these out. So let me just, okay, so inference.
So, I don't like it. I don't think the word transcendental is actually very appropriate here, so I'm just going to not use that. Here's a general form of the argument we're trying to make, which is what you just said a few seconds ago. Right, there's some data or some fact that we collectively agree to, X, right? In this case, it could be that we have knowledge, or that there's intelligibility, or whatever you want to think exactly about that. And then we say, Y is the necessary precondition for X, or is at least a necessary precondition for X. Where Y, in your case, is something like Christian theism, whatever exactly, something like that. So the very least existence of some God. And when I understand necessary precondition, that suggests to me that there's some strict logical entailment from the one to the latter. In other words, X entails Y. Necessarily if X, then Y. Okay. Right? And what else does it mean for it to be a necessary precondition? You can't have one without the second, right? And if I'm looking for support for this conditional premise, this X is in this, or Y is a necessary precondition for X, I'm going to look for a logical inference from the fact that X to the fact that Y. Right, so I'm going to some inference, some chain of reasoning that starts with X and concludes with Y. If you can show that, just draw it out, to some like logical proof, then you would demonstrate it.
Okay, so can I make sure if I'm following you? So if we say Y is the necessary precondition for X,
Mm-hmm.
like so if X is some data point like knowledge or logic or something like that, you're looking for the inference that
it should be logically impossible to have X without Y. Right?
Okay. Yes. Okay. And so, I see. I think I know what you're talking about when you say inference. So you want a line of reasoning to show that Y, for example, is in fact the necessary